Okay.
We're live now. Yeah, absolutely, we're live now.
Oh, as I was saying, welcome everyone to our event in partnership with the Warwick Behavioural Insights team for Behavioural Science after academia. I'm Azim, and we have Sarah here as well. We're from Cowry Consulting, as you might know, and we'll talk a bit about ourselves. But to begin this session, we'd love to know a wee bit more about our audience, and we know people might be rolling in gradually over the course of the next minute or so. So we're going to give you guys some time. I'm just going to switch my screen now. It would be wonderful if everyone could go to menti.com and use the code up on the screen in front of you right now. And very shortly, and by very shortly I mean literally now, there's going to be a poll up on your screen, so we can understand a bit about you and make this a wee bit more interactive. And we're going to have polls just like these ones throughout the scattered throughout this event, just to make it a bit more engaging and to respond to some of your queries and to understand a bit more about what you guys are doing. So we'll stay on this screen for another couple of minutes. But you can simply go to menti.com and use the code 824x98, and then just choose one of these. None of this is it's all anonymous, so feel free. Yeah, have to specify that.
Yeah, no, it's important information, absolutely.
Amazing.
Great.
Cool, we already have some numbers ticking in, bit of economics, bit of behavioral science, some others. Okay.
Interesting.
Definitely.
Azim, does the other bucket you can't specify, or does it just?
No, you can't specify. It's just others. But feel free to type, jot down in the comment section what is your particular field. Sorry, we couldn't add all the fields. There is a limitation of these polls that you can do online. But it is interesting. This seems to be 0 on psychology for now. Let's see how that.
Yeah, where are my psychology colleagues at?
Well, at least we have some economics representing.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Which is good. Very good. Cool. Sarah, feel free to shout out when you think, given plenty of time.
Yeah, I've actually got a little stop clock, and it's got 10 seconds left on it for until it hits a minute. So okay. Maybe I like a round number. So
okay.
There you go. Okay, there you go.
Okay, 1 minute.
Let's kick on.
The poll will remain open, so feel free to stay on this menti.com. Don't close that tab. You're gonna have polls coming up throughout this event, and they'll automatically update on that page. So keep that tab open on your phone or on your laptop, wherever you have it. And yeah, we'll keep coming back to it. Another cool feature about this is, as you may have noticed once you completed the poll, there's a tiny little ask question down there. So as we go through this entire presentation, if you at any point want to ask us a question about a particular topic, just feel free to note it down. And at the end of this presentation, we're actually going to go through as many questions as possible. We've also cheekily already included 4 questions, and these questions were not entirely made up by us, but were in fact submitted by some of you guys on the online form that we had put in prior to starting this event. So without further ado, that's the word, let's go back here. That's a poll, and I'll hand over to Sarah to take us through this next bit.
Amazing. Thank you, Azim, and welcome everyone. Hopefully this will be a really fun interactive session. As Azim has said, we'll be using Mentimeter throughout, so if you could just make sure that you're engaging with that, that will be really helpful for us. As with all of sessions like this, we have a quick agenda to start us off. Our intention today is to really give you an introduction to Cowry Consulting, who Azim and myself are representing, and then give you a more practical insight into how we work on kind of a day-to-day basis. What does a behavioural science consultancy actually do? Then we're going to share some case studies from recent projects to bring that to life a little bit. And then towards the end, we're going to cover some of the most frequently asked questions that we receive before moving into a more open Q&A session through Mentimeter, as we said, where you can ask those questions that you've been, burning to find the answers about. And we want to, give you the opportunity to get as much out of the session as possible. So we've left a lot of room at the end for that question and answer session, so that you have that chance to really dig into what we've been sharing. So hopefully that all sounds really good. So let's start with some introductions and a little bit of background to give you a flavour of how Azim and I both got here. I'll go first. My name is Sarah, and I am the lead behavioural consultant at Cowry. So my path into behavioural science and I suppose consultancy more generally was not a particularly straight one. I studied psychology at the University of Birmingham, coming up to about 10 years ago now, which is a scary thought. And after finishing my degree, it really wasn't immediately clear to me what careers were available to a psych student. And so I made the very logical decision of moving to London and getting a job in finance. And I worked for a boutique asset management company for 5 years. And while I was there, I had to start studying for sort of my professional qualifications. And that's where I came across behavioural finance. And I'll be honest, it was like a light bulb had gone off for me, really. I'd always felt like there was a lot to be said for combining psychology with sort of finance, with economics. And I'd always been interested in sort of understanding the mechanics of decision making more thoroughly. But I hadn't really been aware up until that point of this growing field. Remember, this was 10 years ago. So I know everyone now is very much aware, but I'm a bit older. And so I quit my job in finance. My parents were a little bit unhappy about that, but got to follow your gut. And I went back to uni to study behaviour change at UCL, where I got my master's degree. And I was studying for my master's when I realised that I was going to have the same issue this time round as I'd had when I finished my undergrad, in that I just really wasn't aware of where to go or what to do after the degree part had been achieved, aside from maybe going to work for the WBIT or something like that. So I started stalking people on LinkedIn, going to talks like this, having coffee with as many people as possible. And eventually I ended up getting a job at the Behavioural Architects as their global BE intelligence consultant. I worked there for just under 2 years. And then at the start of this year, I moved to Cowry to take up my current position, which has brought me 8 months later to talking with you all this evening. And I will let Azim introduce himself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And what an exciting career you've had, Sarah. It's always interesting to just hear a bit more about your background. It's fascinating how you came from the field of finance and all of that. A bit about myself. I suppose it would be remiss not to mention that I was actually a Warwick alumni. Just over 2 years ago, I finished my master's with 1 year ago. Wow. I finished my master's in behavioral and economic science at the University of Warwick. And it was just an amazing journey. But then I assume a lot of you guys are currently pursuing that course. Right after my master's, I started Cowry. But to maybe wind back even further, I come from Mumbai, India, and my journey with behavioral economics really started in my first year of undergrad. Really, before starting my undergrad, I didn't know what economics was. Like, I legitimately used to be a full-on science student. Like, physics was my shit, so to speak. And and then I sort of realized that I really wanted to understand a bit more about real-world decision making and less theoretical applications and more practical applications. That's why I chose to move into economics. But what I realized as soon as I moved into economics is that economics was the most far away thing from actual real world decision making. And that caught me by surprise because it didn't feel like those graphs reasonably explained how people actually behaved and how they made these economic decisions and, filled all these criterias. I soon realized that what I was truly interested in is a mix of psychology and economics. And at that time was really when nudge and behavioral science was in this massive explosion phase. So naturally I caught on. But, the second I started wanting to study more about behavioral science, behavioral economics, it was just not a thing in India. Like, it is barely a thing now, but like 5 years ago, it really wasn't a thing. And I had to really struggle to sort of find my own place. I did a distance learning undergrad in economics from the London School of Economics, but they didn't have any courses in behavioral economics for the distance learning part. So I had to really scour and find, and what I did was I approached tons and tons of people through the internet. Every agency you can think of, really, I shot them an email, just sort of get some work experience and get some real exposure, some collaborative working in behavioral science and behavioral economics. And I was fortunate enough to meet some kind people, and that led me to have great exposure in terms of healthcare and behavioral science and healthcare voice applications of behavioral science, as well as global policy and public policy decision making. So I've done a couple of projects on that. That eventually led me to starting my own company in India in my 4th year in my undergrad, where I practiced behavioral science in the education sector, doing all sorts of things, ranging from better, higher teacher employment, sort of teacher satisfaction, student retention, student attendance, reducing child abuse, and ranging through all sorts of things, which finally led me to me deciding, okay, I need to really get a formal education, and I want to grow beyond just my own company. So company I co-founded, sorry, and that's what led me to come to Warwick. So yeah, that's a whistle stop tour of me. And yeah, I'll hand it back to Sarah. And
yeah. It's nice to hear a bit more about your background as well, Azim. I feel like we, since I started at Cowry, it's probably fair to say, understandable that I haven't actually been working in the office. None of us have. So Azim and I have actually had limited opportunities to work together in person. So this is a nice opportunity to learn about each other as well. And then, okay, so this is the wider Cowry team. So starting from, just 3 people back in 2015, we've now grown to 24 people and are the fastest growing behavioural science consultancy in the UK, dedicated to the practical application of behavioural science to business challenges specifically. And, we, at the start of this session, asked you guys to share your backgrounds with us. We're a mixture, mainly psychologists and economists, but we also have sociologists, anthropologists. But basically what we have all together is a shared passion for understanding, these drivers of human behavior that both Azim and I have touched on, which I believe, is something we will have in common with most of you listening this evening. So now we've introduced you to the team and we've introduced you to ourselves, but what does Cowry actually do? So as the tagline on our website reads, we develop creative solutions to challenging business problems using scientific insights about how people actually think and behave rather than what they say. And I think it's fair to say that traditionally companies have built products and services based on the assumption that customers are fully rational and always act in a way that maximizes their best interests. Well, I don't have to tell, this audience that we now know that that isn't always the case. And there is often a difference between what we say and how we act and how we think we're going to behave. We have these systematic irrationalities in our behavior where emotions, prior experience, and the environment can have a really powerful impact on our decisions. And it's really important for our clients to understand those things when it comes to their most important business challenges and how all those different things may impact those challenges. Behavioural science highlights the need for a sort of academically robust understanding of why customers, employees, or clients behave the way they do, rather than simply designing products and services based on how we think they are going to act or behave. And using this approach and sort of a deeper understanding of how humans think, we're able to develop and test solutions and their effectiveness across different business contexts, such as financial services, which is a personal favorite of mine, retail, public good, and lots of other different areas. And then when it comes to applying behavioural science to business specifically, part of what Cowry does is consider the unique constraints there are when you're applying science within a business environment versus, say, in research. Often the teams we are working with have, at least initially, quite a limited understanding of behavioural science. They might have read Nudge, Freakonomics, sometimes Thinking Fast and Slow, occasionally, all 3. That's great. But they don't have that sort of breadth of or depth of understanding. They're also almost universally short on resource. So that's both, time, everyone's time poor in the world of work, and money, which can be a fun challenge. So what that means for us is that we really have to focus on a few different areas. So primarily bridging that gap between academia and business, balancing our use of jargon without watering down the actual content and the actual insights. We want to make it, easy for them to understand, but we don't want to take away the really foundational knowledge that underpins everything. And so these are the kind of principles we put together to guide us when we're doing that. Firstly, we try and make it fun. We all know that information is much easier to engage with and take on board if we can make it fun and memorable. The best thing about this point is that basically everyone who works at Cowry could talk about how much they love behavioural science and why for hours on end. So we basically just try and take that passion and share it with the people that we're working with.
That's the way of us working sometimes.
Like, oh no, this meeting was only meant to be half an hour and we've been talking for 4. It's like not necessarily the most efficient sometimes. And then next, we make things accessible. That's really important. So as I said, oftentimes our clients have this limited knowledge or no knowledge at all. So we're making sure that when we present all our deliverables, it's accessible so that they can understand it easily and off the bat without a degree, basically. We want to make sure all our recommendations are practical and our timelines are fast. Businesses want solutions and they want them yesterday. That doesn't mean, we forego that important foundational research and sort of the really important testing and iteration. It just means that in kind of business lingo, we work in a leaner way. And then finally, we want our recommendations and developments to be demonstrably, pronunciation there, effective. That means we pilot our work, we perform statistical analysis to establish as much as possible where we've had an impact. And this stage can be tricky when we're working with busy companies. They're not always keen for a long testing phase or to provide us with the access we need to establish a control group and a treatment group if we want to do an RCT. For the most part, we work with the companies to find a solution when that props up, but we've also worked to, as I said, sort of streamline our testing phase. It's admittedly shorter than what you would normally expect in kind of a research environment, but it still allows us to observe and test and iterate in a sort of more practical way. And then we are going to talk more in depth about our process next, but just to quickly mention some of our main clients, it'd be remiss not to just give some name checks here. We work across a range of sectors, as I've mentioned, with a variety of really interesting companies. And, as the slide says here, more and more people and businesses are recognizing the importance and the power of behavioral science, which means we're getting basically more opportunities to work with really cool people. We've worked to deliver pretty transformational results, which again, we'll talk on a bit more later in this presentation, for clients like Amazon, for Sky, Tesco, Fidelity, people like that. And to date, we've done things like improve customer service, remodel communications, optimize UX journeys, and even improved health and safety in one instance. So there's a ton of variety. So now we're going to move more into our typical processes. We wanted to do a bit more of a deep dive into the inner workings of Cowry to show you kind of what we're talking about, really, and what I mean when I keep saying applying BSci to business, which starts with how our teams are split up or constructed. So the way we work at Cowry starts with this variety of skill sets that we've brought together within the company. Broadly speaking, we have 4 main areas of expertise, although that's not, completely comprehensive. And then also on top of that, some people like Azim here is so multi-talented that he sits across all these different buckets. But starting with behavioural consultants like myself, our job is to bridge that gap between that academic understanding and the practical sort of actionable insights for businesses. We work primarily to develop and maintain business relationships, educate about the power and impact of behavioural science, and ultimately sit in that sort of coordination of developing solutions that the clients require for a variety of challenges. Azim, you're probably in a better position to explain choice architects.
Yeah, absolutely. Choice architects are precisely as the name sort of suggests, we help people make choices using language. And so whether that comes to redesigning customer contact center scripts or whether redesigning a letter, poster, stuff like that, when it comes to how language or the way things are perceived, whether that's a physical change, physical nudge, or whether that's a language-oriented nudge. That's something that choice architects deal with. So we try to look at different models and different frameworks and come up with what we think our best recommendations are. And also, I suppose on that note, I'll take you through the whistle-stop tour of experimental analyst, which is a bit of what I do as well. But essentially, a lot of times business want experimental results, but they're quite used to the traditional method of finding experimental results, which is essentially saying, oh, look, our sales have gone up 66% ever since this marketing campaign went out. Well, that's not an experiment, and so we have to introduce this different way of thinking, different way of understanding robustly whether our results are simply due to chance or not. So introducing this idea of RCTs, A/B split tests, or sometimes quasi-experimental design, such as looking at observational data and then doing some sort of regression analysis or RDD designs, etc. So there are a variety of things that can happen. It is a more experimental role as well, because it does involve a lot of client management in some cases, but also sometimes you just get data that cannot be analyzed. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on. But yeah, to sum it all up, to understand and to verify our actual interventions and to test the impact and then bring them forward as a business case, so that behavioral consultants can sort of take that and then push it forward back to the clients and win new projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say from sort of my experience of different agencies, having the experimental analyst's role as being such an important one at Cowry is kind of pretty unique. Having that ability to thoroughly test what we're delivering is quite unique, and it's amazing to have people on board that can deliver those results for us, because I could not do it myself. And then our last category is also kind of quite unique to Cowry at the moment, for a B-side consultancy anyway, but bound to be more popular, I would say, across the industry as more and more people catch on. And these guys are the behavioral designers. As with seemingly all things within the B-side world, the term behavioral designer is a little amorphous, but at Cowry, behavioral design is the application of our behavioral science insights to the design of a product or a service or a consumer journey, potentially, whether that be sort of redesigning the Tesco Club Card app using key principles, or redesigning customer comms to encourage engagement and click-through. Our designers are all experts in perceptual psychology and really help to take our ideas and our solutions and make them real and make them tangible for the client to assess. Sometimes we deliver a final product that the client can just take away and use. Or other times we just provide sort of templates or frameworks. For example, something like, in your free trial emails, make sure the main CTA button uses this color, this size font, and is placed, here in the visual hierarchy of that page. The behavioral designers are in charge of all of that, and it really helps bring our ideas to life.
Amazing. Thanks, Sarah. And I guess that brings us right to how these roles operate and how they sort of split across our three-step process. And, something that I'm really, really proud of that I can represent from Cowry is that we do have a really simple three-step process, at least towards in front-facing to our clients. I know I've worked with a lot of agencies and a lot of companies that find it really important to have this massive pie chart or massive flow chart of the different stages of a journey to sort of finish at that end result of, we'll start with this and do this and then 33 different steps. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the scientific method, identifying a problem, constructing a hypothesis, and then testing that hypothesis. And that is beautifully laid down in a way that clients can really easily understand, which is having a behavioral audit, which essentially means understanding the problem, identifying these friction points, psychological friction points that exist within a client's journey. So that might be physical friction points. So for example, a store layout in a retail store that's creating psychological friction, or that might be something to do with contact center scripts. So a customer service agent who's not through no fault of his own being really unhelpful because of the language that he's asked to use. Or it could be in UX journeys that are just terrible. I mean, every single one of us has definitely visited a website that's made it the most difficult thing to spend your money. Like, I want to give you my money. Please take my money, right? We've all had that. So that's behavioral audit. Behavioral design is where the designers, the choice architects, we all come together, all the roles really, in order to create an intervention. So that might be a call center script that's been redesigned, or that might be a website that's been redesigned, etc. And we do this through models and frameworks. And finally, that brings us to experimental design, where we take that hypothesis that our designs are going to have a change in the behavior that we're looking to change, and we test it using experimental design. Now, while that is all really simple, and that is something that we try to strive towards simplicity, there is certainly a few nags and a few mini breakdowns along the way that's more internal rather than external. Yeah, I mean, this is what it actually looks like when you look at it in terms of a the broader picture, from the actual start to the actual finish. And really, in previous presentations, I haven't really done this. We used to just show this three-step process. I think this one's really important because we always get the question, okay, fine, but how do you come to this friction stage? Like, does it just show up in your email box? Like, hey, could you friction this, please? So definitely not. There are, these key 7 stages that we go through. First, a proposal, where the behavioral consultants do an excellent job cultivating client relationships and building, either speaking at industry conferences or building client relationships, but essentially identifying and then proposing an area that could be fixed or that can be targeted. Sometimes the clients come to us, sometimes we go to them. And then we do a project kickoff call. Generally, that is something that we hold. We hold an intro call where we speak with senior management and business leaders to really understand the project in detail, and understand the real nicks and knacks of the project. Because sometimes there are things that you might have a project briefing during a proposal, and then you have a project kickoff call. It's like, well, that doesn't sound like anything what was described earlier, but that's fine. We can still do it, but no. And I'm sure, Sarah, you can relate. And
yeah, I'm laughing because that's bringing back some painful memories for me.
And then finally we do some background research. So yeah, prior to project kickoff, obviously, then after project kickoff, we get everything signed off. So we decide on what type of project this is going to be. Is it going to be, we have 4 buckets: dig, fix, teach, and build. Dig being something that's more research oriented. Fix means a business, there's a problem, we want to find a solution. Teach being, it seems like you guys can be well trained to do this yourselves. Let's set up a training routine, whether through our different sets of courses. And build being, we want to actually build a product, an app, a website, a journey from scratch. Can you help us build it? So we identify this bucket, and then we start doing the background research in order to fix the proposition, which is then followed up with the friction audit, where we play back those results, and then follow that up with Fluency, where we show the interventions, and then pilot and experimental analysis. At the same time, well, that still sounds all well and good, but in reality, there are some friction points within our our journey. And yeah, Sarah, do you want to elaborate a bit on some of the tricky bits you've spotted so far?
I mean, there's potential for breakdown at every stage of the journey. Unfortunately, it's never as streamlined as we would like. I think there's often a lot of energy at the beginning around the proposal and project kickoff stage, and then when it comes to, for example, if we're doing like an audit of collateral that the client already has, trying to get that information from them, you'd think they would just be sending it immediately because they're paying us, and yet sometimes it's like getting blood from a stone, just every day being like, please, we really want to do this work for you. Can you send us the information we need? Which is tough. I think there's often I don't know if you were going to talk on this, Azim, but the thing I find about behavioral science that I personally love, but can also cause frustrations, is that quite a lot of the key insights are intuitive, right? So we sort of say that they feel like common sense, but we call them uncommon sense because we do our friction audit, and we go back to a client and we say, these are the things that we think are causing friction in your journey or could be improved, or things that you're not doing, missed opportunities. And they say, oh yeah, well, that's all quite obvious. Like they're not like wowed by it, because it's kind of intuitive what we're saying, which is a good thing. But the point being, they weren't doing it. That's why those friction points exist. So we rub up against that problem sometimes, where people are like, oh yeah, you're saying that, the fact that we use this tiny size 8 font is unhelpful. Well, we knew that already. Like, well, you are using the size 8 font. So
I think a bunch of I think it's usually come from almost a system 1, system 2 response, where oh yeah, that is kind of unhelpful, but I never thought of it as a friction point. But now that you point it out, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And also probably I can expand a bit on the experimental and analysis stage. You would expect that that most clients would be very, very keen to understand whether an intervention worked or not. Would be sending data every single day, just like the most up to date, like how is it going? Have you guys, what's the progress? But the truth is that in business, oftentimes you're so focused on delivering the project, you're so focused on getting that execution right, and you're so focused on actually taking all this consultancy work that has been delivered to you and internally, and then presenting it to the rest of your stakeholders. So something that Jez, the CEO, told me is that I always remember that every presentation that you do, the client has to do 8 times, because they have to sell it in again and again and again to several senior stakeholders to make sure our recommendations are actually approved and done. And what that usually means is that there's so little time that they have to dedicate to getting the experimentation and the analysis spot on, which ends up meaning, through no fault of theirs or ours, that the experimental stage and the data takes forever to get to us, and we really have to push hard, and it's usually messy, and we have to do a lot of the cleaning. But that's again something that you wouldn't really necessarily think unless you know a bit more. But that all being said, there is actually one stage of this journey that is by far the most filled with friction, and can get a bit tricky. And before we get into that, I would love for you guys to tell us what you think is the most one. I think before that, we'd like to capture a bit more about your expectations from this talk, and just because that'll help us answer some of the questions right at the end. So if you could fill this in, and then we get to the next question. So if you go to menti.com, or if you have that tab or that page open, you can fill this poll in right now. We'll give you guys about a minute. And in case you guys may have noticed, Facebook has about a 15-second lag between when we talk and when you actually see me talk. So please forgive any silence from our end. We just don't see anything for a while.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, very.
I love whoever's answered the quantum mechanics.
Clearly, that's what this talk is about.
Yeah, is that you, Azim? Are you here to learn about quantum mechanics? I have a
phone on the side, just constantly picking quantum mechanics. I wish. Sorry, do you have a stopwatch?
Yeah, give it. It's like 25 seconds.
Okay, cool.
Just because I like my round numbers again.
What would you do without some round numbers?
Okay, do you want to move on?
Yeah, brilliant. Just so it seems like you guys want to ask questions regarding the Korean B-side. So be sure to use that ask a question box on Mentimeter. Again, we'll come back to this for anyone who's joining later. You can click on ask a question, and then we'll be touching upon that at the end of this session. So we will try and answer as many questions as we can. And you guys,
you can you can vote as well, can't you? So you can vote which questions you most want answered. So if rather than everyone typing like tell us more about X. Just see if anyone's asked it before and vote that one to the top so we can get through as many as possible.
Yeah, we'll be starting with the most upvoted ones first and then moving that way. And you guys want to learn how BSI is applied in the real world and understand what Cowry Consulting does. Okay, that's brilliant. I think we can absolutely touch upon that in that order. That's really good. And now to come back. Question one of two. So the question is, at what stage do you think we face the most challenges? And you can look at your phones and answer now. So those 7 stages that we described, which one do you think has the most, is the most challenging, where we get the most pushback and we have to do the most work?
Oh, there's a countdown.
There is, yes, indeed. I didn't want to make it too easy this time. Okay, so it seems like a lot of you guys got it right, which is a bit surprising. We expected you guys to did not get this one that right, but yes, indeed, it is friction audit. And Sarah, do you wanna maybe explain why do you think we believe the friction audit is the most challenging?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of people, an equal number of people, went for the proposal stage, and I can see why you might think that faced most challenges. I think in the context of sort of the question as we had designed it, which is a great insight. The proposal isn't so much of a challenge because by the time we're writing a proposal, we tend to have quite a clear idea of what a client might be after or ways we could help them. So actually, that's quite a fun section because we're kind of saying like, oh, we could help you and do all of these things. I mean, they never want all of the things, but it's kind of like providing this menu of options, and we find that quite fun. Or I do anyway. I think the friction is definitely the most challenging. It's important to, so when I first started at Cowry, I was the kind of doing the friction and the fluency process separately was new to me. Previously, we would always have sort of done the audit, looked for all those friction points, then done the fluency, and then presented everything back as a whole in sort of one big presentation. And I was a bit like, why would you split out the friction audit?
Back, because that's kind of a tough meeting, right? You're going in and you're saying, these are all the things that you do wrong. But it's really, really beneficial because firstly, as I kind of said, you'll find that a lot of the recommendations that we have, all the things that we've identified, will have been intuitively understood previously by people. So that's, or at least, you know, they had recognized there was a problem. That's why, or a challenge. That's why they came to us. So that's kind of like, it's really important to engage on that and just get that sort of agreement from the client. However, our tendency is to be defensive when people are critiquing stuff that we care about. And so those conversations can be, you know, delicate. You have to make sure that you know, we've done our work thoroughly. We're backed up by the science, and we're presenting our findings in a way that is important to bring them forward with us and say, like, this is the reason we've identified these things is because now we can work with you to go on and fix them. But it's a challenging section of the journey. What do you think about that, Azim? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting with the friction audit is sometimes you go into a friction meeting really, really proud of like what you've achieved, because at times it's not very obvious what the friction is. Sometimes we're faced with friction journeys, to audit journeys, which are actually on the face of it really, really good. So a really large bank, which, because due to NDA reasons, I can't get into too much, but essentially we are looking at one of their investment journeys, and it was a very sleek, very very easy to use investment journey, and made everything very, very simple. It looked beautiful visually, design wise, but actually when we looked at it, there were quite a few friction points. And then you come back and you're like, okay, I'm really proud of like identifying these friction points. But the reason why the friction audit can be the most challenging is because when those journeys are challenged, when they're supposed to be a really strong product, and the very thing that the client thought was the strongest aspect is the thing we point out is the most psychological, the frictiony. Well, that you can see why that would create a very giant conflict, because clearly in there they expected us to pick out things that they thought would be weaker, not the design, not the stuff that they were already very proud and they've invested millions of pounds of dollars into. They wouldn't want, they would be quite unhappy to face that sort of friction psychologically on that stage. So those are the kind of conversations where you have to have tremendous amount of patience and a tremendous amount of skills to navigate those conversations. But what's amazing is by splitting this friction and fluency presentations out separately, you have that friction audit, you convince the clients, and the clients are bought in. They understand why their journey might need some changing. So when you come back 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later with that fluency presentation, you have a win, because they already bought in, they're already expecting the best, and then you deliver that. So hopefully that all made sense, and I'll pass it back to Sarah for the CFactors. And that is not the CFactors. This is the CFactors. Here we go. Yeah.
No.
Hi, Sarah. Can you hear me?
No.
Okay, I'll take you guys through the CFactors. That's completely fine. I think Sarah might be having some audio problems. That's all right. So in Cowry, what we have is what we have is what we call the CFactors, and there's a really particular reason we call them the CFactors and not cognitive biases and not cognitive heuristics. And what the CFactors are is essentially 14 really common biases that all of you guys, coming from the background that you guys do, would have heard of. Things such as framing, such as priming, such as present bias, mental accounting, all the default bias. So these are common dictionaries for people who are doing a master's, but for clients, they're really not. And a lot of times, I think something that a lot of behavioral consultancies perhaps get wrong is they often refer to psychological barriers as psychological barriers, and they often refer to heuristics, and they often refer to biases and irrational thinking. And I think the only thing that does is sort of make them feel like the superior person in the room, almost like we know these scientific things and you don't know these scientific things, so we're going to make recommendations based on what we know. But not every behavioral science consultancy, by far from it, but it's just a general theme that I've sort of observed in the industry that happens sometimes. But we like to really break it down into these CFactors, which are really easy to understand. So the way we do them is through cards, and really easy to understand cards. So for example, cognitive overload, less is more. Just giving these simple explanations of what cognitive overload is and why people feel that way. So having too many options can make us feel decline to make a decision. So if we have too many options in front of us, we'd rather not make an option at all. So a very famous example for this is the sales of jams in a supermarket, which some of you guys may have heard of. So when you have, there was this very famous experiment done back in the 80s, I believe. And essentially the researchers went to a supermarket, and they had the supermarket was facing a problem with reduced sales of jams. And although the jams were selling well in other places, they weren't selling well in that particular supermarket. And the reason for that, the researchers thought, is because there were too many jams. Like, guys, you have too many jams. This is what they had to say. And they reduced the amount of jams from 24 to 6, which led to a 10 times increase in their sales. So when you describe heuristics and bias in such an easy to understand way, and you present it in an easy to understand graphic, what we found is clients remember these heuristics and bias. They may not ever remember, they may never say that they're familiar with psychological biases and heuristics of decision making, and the different ways systems that people use in their minds, but they will say they know CFactors. And I think that's an achievement. If you can.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we also have.
Can you hear me again? Sorry.
Yes, I can.
Am I back? I've gone old school with the plug-in. Just to quickly say on that, the cognitive overload as well, I hope you don't mind me cutting back in, Azim, is that, you know, I'm sure that people might be sitting at home saying, right, okay, the JAM study, it's kind of old at this point in time, and that's true. We know that this study is a good starting point for cognitive overload. We know it's not exhaustive, and we know that other work has layered on additional nuance since then. You know, such as the sort of, there was a 2010 meta-analysis. Can there ever be too many options? And I think the more recent the working paper, how self-expression increases choice overload. That's really interesting as well. But the point here is to provide that illustrative example that is easy to understand and is kind of provides that clear foundation. So that's why we choose these examples rather than something that's like super modern, adds all of that nuance, all of that texture and that context, because we're not there yet with our clients. They just need the basics.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then as Azim was just about to move on to, I'll pick it back up. Just another example we have here is mental accounting. So if we were presenting this to a client, we would say something along the lines of, you know, mental accounting is this tendency people have to treat money differently depending on factors such as where the money came from or what we're intending to use it for, rather than thinking about it in terms of it all being sort of fungible assets. And additionally, you know, people often have their own personal rules of thumb when it comes to spending these different mental accounts or these different pots. And then the example we give here is that people often have a special account, either physical or mental, set aside for a holiday or another big purchase like a car or a new sofa or something like that, whilst also carrying substantial credit card debt, which doesn't really make sense when you think about it. And that kind of example tends to resonate with clients and with audiences when we go through these examples, because, you know, almost universally we find that people can give their own examples of mental accounts that they have without much consideration. So yeah, this one sort of really resonates with people, and it's quite a nice example to give. Yeah,
absolutely. Can't agree more. And what's interesting is about the CFactors is since the last 5 years, the CFactors have become, you know, to our clients that have worked with us for the last 5 years, almost synonymous in the dictionary to psychological biases and heuristics. They absolutely understand. They love them. They have cards, CFactor cards at home that they use when actually doing a behavioral science project. So, you know, that's all been encouraging. But since 5 years, we have amassed a huge amount of literature in terms of how these different CFactors correlate with different industries. So in terms of finance, is there a pattern that we can see where almost every finance project has similar CFactors? So what about UX? What about, you know, finance in general? That was the thinking that led to the start of the Behavioral Fingerprint project. And this is a really, really exciting project that is absolutely very new. In fact, it's so new that the first Behavioral Fingerprint report is going to go live this Thursday. And this would be a little preview of what you can expect in that entire report. So it's free. And I would strongly encourage anyone who's interested after this presentation to absolutely go and download that when it releases. But coming back to it, what is a behavioral fingerprint? What we did is we compiled a list of all our major projects that we did in various different industries. And that allowed us, using machine learning and AI, to systematically weight and adjust these different parameters, including, you know, how impactful the project was, what was the evidence, what is the different literature that went behind it. So we have a very, very in-house algorithm that essentially quantified our impact in these different CFactor buckets, both for friction as well as for the fluency. So what you're seeing right now over here is our finance behavioral fingerprint. When we looked at all the projects that we've done in the finance industry, and then we ran it through our AI, this is the map that it shot out, which essentially kind of tells us, and it really does resonate with everything that we worked with in finance so far, is that over here, and if you can see my cursor, then over here, there's tons of ambiguity in finance, using jargon words, and using terms that people just don't understand, lack of authority. People don't always trust what companies have to say, and they don't really establish their authority well enough. And then obviously, most of all, cognitive overload. And I mean, anyone who has tried to open a, complex product at a bank or try to get into investments without being a finance student themselves will know how cognitively overloading bank communications, regulatory communications can be. So what that enables us to do is give us a benchmark that we can compare our frictions against. But more importantly, I suppose, is the next section, which is the fluency, which is when we rejig and we convey a behavioral intervention. Before doing that, in general, what are we finding the common behavioral sort of fluencies are? What is finance doing right? And here we can see that there is a lot of, when we intervene, the way that we identify and correct for these behavioral frictions that we have seen already is by first introducing a lot of cognitive easing. So making sure that cognitive overload is taken care of. Similarly, doing ambiguity aversion, reaffirming commitment, because commitment helps in not only in terms of authority, that changed, but also in terms of building trust and relationships. And this, again, it provides us with a quantifiable figure to go to our clients and say, okay, we can be very confident in saying that against the industry, this is how you're doing, this is how you benchmark, and here's how our intervention is going to make a difference, and here's how we're tackling the right areas, and not something based on just our feelings, and not based on our opinions, but actual evidence. And that's definitely something that we're super proud of. And on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah to take you guys through an extremely interesting case study. Back to you, Sarah.
Great. Thanks, Azim. So we have, introduced ourselves. We've given you a more in-depth look at sort of our typical processes and the tools that we use when we're working on a day-to-day basis at Cowry. I've had one small technical meltdown, but how does that all come together? What actual projects have we worked on? What do those projects actually look like? Azim and I are going to share with you 3 case studies now to sort of encapsulate the kind of different work that we do at Cowry. And, we don't have all the time in the world, so this isn't an extensive list. We work on a ton of really interesting projects, but just pulled out 3 for you today. So this is a fairly typical, to start with, a case study from a project we worked on with Fidelity around their Trustpilot ratings. So we've done a lot of work with Fidelity over the years, and this project came about because we'd built up a really great relationship with them, and they identified a need for some behavioural insight around this challenge. As with all things these days, consumers are relying more and more on third-party ratings and review websites to decide whether or not they want to engage with a service or buy a product. That goes, for where to eat. We're all definitely reading the Google reviews, where to go on holiday. I mean, you basically can't go on holiday these days without checking TripAdvisor, and who to invest your money with, like Fidelity. And for these financial services products, the main review site is Trustpilot. But unlike telling everyone about the amazing meal you had recently, or the trip you took to the Costa del Sol, people are typically unmotivated to review their utilities or their financial services unless they've had a really bad experience. And I know that happens as well on TripAdvisor and Google reviews and all of the review sites. Don't get me wrong, but when the sector is, specifically a little bit more, can we say, dull, maybe, you don't tend to get the positive views to balance out those negative opinions, which is a real problem. In fact, despite getting really good customer service responses when actually talking to customers and over the phone or email, etc. The Trustpilot score for Fidelity when we started this project was an average of 1 star out of 5, which is pretty tragic. So understandably, Fidelity were really trying to encourage people to rate them on Trustpilot by sending them emails after the customer had interacted with them in a positive way, asking them if they could please share that experience on Trustpilot. But it just wasn't having any effect. They weren't getting any real traction from that. Their review was staying at 1 star. And so they came to Cowry and asked for our help in revamping this email campaign. How could they increase the number of people who sort of subsequently performed their desired behaviour, which was rating the Fidelity, and ultimately improving their sort of overall score. So we followed our if you could just pop back one slide, Azim, thank you. So we followed our usual process that we've sort of spent a lot of time discussing already, and we got to the friction audit of this pre-existing collateral. So auditing digital comms like this is normally quite fun and straightforward, because there tends to be lots of fairly obvious missed opportunities or clear areas for improvement, and this was really no exception to that. So I won't spend a ton of time on this, but to pull out a few things we really did notice off the bat. Firstly, there was really low processing fluency throughout all of their emails. Processing fluency is the ease in which information is processed. Straightforward, and increasing this fluency increases our ability to cognitively comprehend the stimulus, in this case the email, and we're also more likely to act on information if it's processed easily. So the language and sentence structure here is incredibly clunky and difficult to understand. That last sentence, I think it's, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and so would other Fidelity users, and it should only take a minute or two. That's just a bad sentence, and it makes it difficult for us to process what they're trying to ask us to do. We probably won't engage with it, and we're less likely to perform the required action. Secondly, there was this missed opportunity to leverage consistency principles. So consistency in this kind of instance means our desire as people to be consistent in our projections of ourselves. So consistent in our behaviors, consistent in our commitments, in our opinions, etc. For example, if you're normally a generous person and someone asks you to donate to charity, if they can remind you in some way of that generosity, you're more likely to donate, because that would be more consistent. That would be the most consistent action with your sort of self-identity. So here, these people have had positive interactions with Fidelity. They've said that they have had good customer service, you know, when they've been talking to Fidelity directly, but they're not. We want them to go on and put that same information onto Trustpilot. So it's about pulling out that consistency in action and behavior, and really playing off that if possible. And then finally, there's no attempt to utilize reciprocity, which could have been really powerful here. We're asking the customer to do something for us. So offering them something in return is a really simple way of increasing that motivation and encouraging our required behavior. So then we moved on to our fluency process. And this is what we came up with to improve those emails. Some of this is, as I said, sort of correcting the friction points that we had outlined, and then some of it's just additional augmentation or optimization. So we promoted that idea of consistency. We started by reminding the customer of past behavior that was congruent with our desired outcome, and we subconsciously prompt them to want to remain consistent with their perception of themselves and with those previous commitments they've made to us. So we're saying, you know, you're a loyal Fidelity customer who's reviewed us highly in our recent surveys. So you've already sort of done this for us before. You're very loyal. We want you to continue to do that. Be consistent with that kind of self-identity. Then we've primed the customer a little bit by speaking about our 5-star service in advance of them giving the review. So that should be playing on their mind if they do then go forward and give us that nice 5-star rating. And then we've introduced a little subtle bit of reciprocity, as I said, by highlighting how easy we have made this process for the customer. We've done that for them, how little work we're asking them to do in return for our amazing service. So this is all we ask of them. You know, we give them all this great stuff from Fidelity. We help them with their investments. We give them this great customer service. We just want them to do a little review for us on Trustpilot. And then there are a few other things that you might notice, such as increasing the saliency of that main call to action. The blue button is larger now and will draw more attention. And we've streamlined the language on that button to increase the processing fluency on that. We've also reinforced the time period required from the customer if they were to go and write a review. And that's really to reduce any ambiguity, because we know customers are much more likely to engage in a process if they know how long it will take and how little effort it will involve. So we've just really tried to make that as clear and transparent as possible. And so, yeah, those were sort of the basic ideas of the things we changed. What kind of impact did that have? Were we able to do anything big with our interventions here? Yes, we were. I think it's, you know, the slide says it all, really. We were able to increase their average ratings from that 1 star before we started the project to 4 stars by the end. and that was using we got that result using and tested that result for statistical significance using pre and post test methodology. So it was just they were absolutely thrilled. We were really happy to help, and it was really quite simple, quite straightforward tweaks that have such a huge impact, which is kind of like the joy of behavioral science, I think. And I'm going to pass over to Azim, I think, to go through a few more examples.
Yeah, I think just that on that previous one, it's just amazing how getting just the Trustpilot ratings up can have such a massive impact, especially when it comes to new users. And you can do that with these simple language tweaks, but really carefully thought up ones. And like you said, uncommon sense sometimes.
Yeah.
And on to the next one. This is from Quilter. They're an extremely, extremely large investment and pension provider here in the UK. And they came to us with a really simple problem, which is nobody's using our online service that we spent the last 5 years making for them. And we said, okay, well, how are you promoting your online service? And they went, what? We're like, okay, well, you need to promote your online service if you want people to use your online service, and you don't need to have a, but obviously I'm exaggerating. Of course, they promoted their online service in different ways, but one key area that they did not promote their online service is this key demographic that they were trying to move online. And that was a demographic of people who call the call centers, because that adds a lot of cost to Quilter. And the way we decided to approach this, which I just absolutely love, is create this concept called pop. And a pop is perfect because you just pop something into a conversation. So these are the specific nudges that the agents were trained to pop into conversations. And the reason why I love pop so much is because it actually means something, promoting online propositions. So yay. I didn't come up with that, but I love it. And we used a multitude of different pops, and we tested it through an experiment of different agents. I'll just skip through that. But the important bit here is we didn't actually have much friction, because like I mentioned, they weren't promoting the online proposition during when people called. So if someone called, let's say, to get a valuation on their investments, and they went, hello, hi, can you tell me your valuation? And the agent spent 15 minutes, opening up all this stuff, getting the valuation, said, okay, bye. Well, that was a perfect time. The customer's in a hot emotional state. They want to know their valuation, and they probably waited like 10 minutes on hold through the customer service ring, and now they have to wait another 10 minutes while everything loads up. So they're like quite anxious to find out. That's a perfect time to actually tell people, oh, you know what? I'm happy to do that for you. I'm going to do that, but it's going to take me like 5 minutes or 10 minutes while I open everything up. But in the future, if you want to find your valuations, we actually have an online proposition that can give you a valuation in seconds. So when you phrase that in that hot emotional state, when you use this clever framing of saying, I'm actually going to take 10 minutes to open everything up, but you can do this yourself in seconds. That's our second C factor, is using that perfect frame of reference while people are in that hot emotional state to get them to change their behavior and take action. And finally, a lot of people thought nobody's using the online proposition, so it must not be good. So let me call. Well, it's about correcting that and changing the social norm. So another one is if someone called in to, ask whether they are doing anything really, the agent can say, okay, do you actually bank online? And the customer says, yes, I do bank online. Says, okay, well, actually, more and more of our customers are going online and doing all this themselves, just in the same way they conduct online banking. So now the customer on the phone actually feels, oh, that sounds really easy. If more and more people are doing it, that probably sounds something that I could do as well. And I already bank online. I've just admitted to you. So using these clever pops, and we had several of them, these two are just illustrations using different C factors. We set out to conduct an experiment to understand how well this works. And it was super interesting results, which I'm glad to show you. We looked at number of online registrations per week in two different groups, one an experimental group that were using our pops and one in a control group that were not using our pops. And they only started, we just gave them the pops in week 0. And so they weren't quite familiar with them. But you can see the tremendous growing impact of using the pops through each week as they got more attuned, while as in the control group, there was very small change. And when we tested that statistically, that was actually not a statistically significant change in the control group, even though it is a slight upward slope. But this led to a massive 388% uplift in customer registrations through the experimental period. And that's still happening now, going on now. And we're still seeing some incredible results with an extremely small p-score and using some non-parametric tests because we didn't have the right sample size and blah, blah, blah. But that's not important here. I suppose what is important is in that 6-week period, instead of 27, we were able to get 105 customer registrations. And that has a massive knock-on effect in terms of the ROI and the return on investment from our one singular project. That leads us into our final and probably my favorite case study to talk about, which is the Morgan Sindall health and safety case study. This is something that was done actually a bit before my time here at Cowry, but is still one of the most fascinating case study. And it is also a case study that we won quite a few awards for, actually. So what do you do when people in your construction site are hurting themselves and by falling down ladders, and that's costing you multi-million dollars in lost sales? This was a very real problem faced by Morgan Sindall back in 2015 or 2016, I believe, when we conducted this project. Because you see, the way that construction bids are laid out, and Morgan Sindall is a construction company, they do the interior fitting stuff, so not the outside construction that you more or less see on the outside, but once the construction's actually complete, just doing all the interior fittings and stuff like that, that's what Morgan Sindall does. So Morgan Sindall was faced with this extremely perplexing problem, because the way that the bids are decided, whether Morgan Sindall or another company get this interior fitting contract, which are usually worth hundreds of millions of dollars, is by comparing different things. But importantly, one of them is called radars. And what a radar is essentially, if someone falls off a ladder or hurts themselves, that's considered a safety violation, and they get one radar. So if one company, which has the same, essentially same in every other way as Morgan Sindall, but it has low radars, they're going to get the bid. So this is actually a massive problem, and someone that they were looking to change. So they brought us in, and they wanted us to identify the different ways that these radars occur. So we had to take a really innovative approach to this one. And the way we did it, and I love talking about this, is obviously you'd have a sort of Hawthorne effect if you showed up and said, "Oh, I'm a psychologist, I'm here to observe whether you make radars or not." Well, nobody's going to make any calls during that observational period. So we went in almost undercover. We were put in as health and well-being experts, nothing to do with radars or actual safety violations and stuff like that. Just people are concerned about the general health and well-being. And we went in just with high-vis jackets on the 87th floor of a construction building down in the South Bank. And we roamed around with tiny clickers in our pockets. And it wasn't me, it was my colleague Pippa. But she roamed around with like these tiny clickers in her pocket and just kind of visualized that. And every time she observed a radar, she would go click, 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 click. And that's the way she did that for a long amount. I think it was a 4-week testing period, slightly longer, but that's what she did. And during the friction audit, we observed, this is kind of the break room that everyone was sitting down and relaxing. And so we observed quite a few radars during that time, and we looked at the break room. And what we realized is, well, in general, the friction audit says that is all these people are generally 20 to 25-year-old young adults working in this high stress environment in construction. And here's the place that they come to cool down. Does this look very cool down to any of you? Not to me, certainly not to me, but does it look cool down to you, Sarah?
No, not at all.
Hardwood benches, posters and placards all over the wall. And what we felt was that just led to this high stress environment and a high level of testosterone. And what happens is when men have a high level of testosterone is that they make silly mistakes and they take slightly rasher decisions. So for example, one of the rasher decisions that we observed is let's say someone is doing light fittings on top of a roof, and they have these rotatable ladders which have tiny little wheels under them. So they lock the wheel, they're supposed to lock the wheels, climb up the ladder, change the fitting, come back down, unlock the wheels, move to the next one right next door, lock it, go back up. Instead, they just don't lock the wheels, they finish the fitting, and then they grab onto the rail bars and just drag themselves over to the next fitting. And as you can imagine, that has led to a few broken bones. And here's where they were cooling down, and it sort of, we felt that sort of explains it. So we had an idea, and it was an idea that's never been tested before and never been done before, barring one place, which is nothing to do with the construction side, but we'll touch upon that. We changed the colors of the wall. Now, we did not change it to white. We've actually taken off all the colors in this instance because we want to let you guess. So back to the poll, I would like you guys to guess what color did we make this wall. And it's going to be a typing session. So get your phones out and type in the box below what you think the color was. So any color you can think of. So I'm going to start the countdown. I'm trying to take into account that there's a 10-second delay and do that now. So you should be live on your menti.com 8299998.
Amazing. Can I just, while we have this quick countdown, I just want to make a clarification on a point that's come through on the questions, which was I keep using this word intuitive when I'm talking about clients kind of intuitively understanding what we're saying. And I think that's I don't mean our interventions are intuitive as in like we're using our intuition to come up with them. That is absolutely not how we work. All of our interventions are evidence-based. We base them on the research, the academic foundation. What I mean by my use of the word intuition is that when you tell someone that something's cognitively overloading or that they're not using language in the best way in this instance, for example, those kind of points can be intuitively understood because they resonate with people. That's what I mean by intuitive, just to clarify. I'm not saying that Azim and I are not sitting in a room being like, well, I think my gut is telling me to do this today.
Oh, how easy would our jobs be then?
Yes.
Certainly shouldn't be called a behavioral scientist. But I love these answers. A lot of you guys got the correct answer, which is pink. I can see tons of those black cards in the background. A few yellows, a few blues, a few whites, and a pink, but I'm a cheat. Brilliant. I love the honesty. I absolutely love the honesty. A green and a beautiful green. Okay, I am very curious why someone said a beautiful green, but maybe I'll have a conversation about that later. But indeed, the correct answer is pink. And oh, that is okay. Never mind. Yeah, there we go. It is pink, but it is a special type of pink, and this pink is known as Baker-Miller pink. It is something that is present on our website, so perhaps one of you guys got a quick look at that. But the Baker-Miller pink is a extremely famous pink because it was used to essentially, the reason why it's called the Baker-Miller pink is because it was used back in the 80s to when cellmates used to misbehave. They used to throw them in solitary confinement in a room with which was pink, Baker-Miller pink. And this Baker-Miller pink has been shown is associated rather with reducing testosterone levels and having a cooling, more relaxing effect. And instantly, I think you can see, just going from this page over here to this one over here, how much more relaxing does this environment look? Of course, we added a few plants in and we changed a few things, but importantly, we changed it to the color pink. At the same time, it would be absolutely wrong to say the only intervention we did at this site was the Baker-Miller pink. That's just one of the more the ones that we won awards for, and one that is particularly famous. We also did a few changes in terms of their designing the way the incentive structures work, so that we added a gamification. So essentially a lottery system, a reverse lottery system is what I like to call it, where you get 5 stars, but if you are found to have committed a RIDDOR, one of your stars is taken away. But the cool thing is that if all of your teams maintains all their 5 stars, at the end of the week, that team would be enrolled in a lottery in which every single person in that team could win a really cool prize. So recently, well, not recently, it was a year ago, I heard about them winning a 55-inch plasma TV, which is a fantastic prize. But and all you have to do is really ensure that. So it's a bit of social norms, a bit of reciprocity, gamification, and all of that. But importantly, Baker Miller Pink. And what happened is after this, we tested this the same way that we tested the frictions and how many readers were happening in the first place by those clickers. And we found an astounding 82% reduction in recorded unsafe behaviors and a really small p-score to go along with that. And due to the success of this project, now Morgan Sindall, or more particularly Aubrey, which is a subsidiary, that's not important, but essentially most of Morgan Sindall's sites all across the UK are now pink. And if you go to a site that's pink, you have us to thank. Now you know. That sort of brings us to the end of our presentation, and we will move on to some frequently asked questions before we get to your questions, because we know that they're going to be, these are just some questions that through experience we get asked all the time, and we'd like to just clarify them first. So number one, well, it's not really a question, but the question usually is, what is a behavioral economist and sort of what he does? And I like to say this is known as the myth of the behavioral economist, and it's a myth that I found at my time in the Warwick at Warwick, but also I see all over, even existing today. And the myth of the behavioral economist is that a behavioral economist is this special sort of entity that exists in that's not a behavioral scientist really, but specializes in economic decision making and operates at the highest levels in these economist firms. And that's something that economists are looking for these mythical behavioral economists to graduate and then hire and then revolutionize the way that they observe, make their economic policies and decision making. That's just not the way any of this works. That's a myth, absolute myth. The way this actually, the way that I have at least observed it works for most traditional economic consultancies is, number one, they have been using behavioral economics, at least to a certain extent, in their model since the last 25 years. So hyperbolic discounting and including that in sort of client estimations and policy decision making is not new to them. And behavioral economics by far is not new to them. The issue is that we look at behavioral science and behavioral economics in a far more nuanced approach, but not an approach that is ready or something that's commonly accepted in the mainstream. Rather, it's a more simplistic approach in behavioral economics that is accepted. So if you as a behavioral economist want to go in and work in a traditional economic consultancy and then be a behavioral economist, that's not the way it works. The way it does work is you can be an economist and you can apply a bit of behavioral economics when you get the time to. You potentially may be able to grow through the years into a role where you're predominantly applying behavioral economics, but that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for a really good economist who's well-versed in traditional economics, but who understands a wee bit of behavioral science. Behavioral economist in a consultancy sense does exist. That's precisely who I am in terms of, but really it's synonymous with a behavioral scientist. There is no real difference apart from the fact that I can do a bit more analysis. I understand econometrics and I can do a bit more analysis, and that's why I'm qualified to call myself a behavioral economist. But if there is someone who had the vaguest sense that that's how behavioral economics or how that sort of pans out in the real world, it's just a myth. It's just a myth that tons of economic students, or not just students, but even professors, and it's just an industry myth really. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any further questions on that. Feel free to leave that in Mentimeter. We'll be on that very shortly. And I'll pass that over to Sarah for the next best question.
The next most frequently asked question. I mean, this is obviously a question we get a lot. Understandably, it was definitely on my mind a lot when I was in your guys' shoes, and you always want as much information as you can possibly get. I think these are my personal tips. Azim, you can feel free to add if you'd like. And I kind of also have a bit more experience of like what my employers were looking for in my previous roles that might hopefully be useful. So firstly, I know it's really boring to hear, but if you can make your name known, make your name familiar to people, that's really helpful. So LinkedIn messages, networking events, talks like this. My advice for making contact with people is to ask a specific question, but make sure it's targeted and not completely onerous and tricky or time consuming to answer. Someone recently messaged me on LinkedIn asking if I could tell them how I was specifically using the knowledge I learned on my master's course in my current day-to-day role, and if I could provide them with a breakdown of my day-to-day routine on as many days as it was different. So if Monday was different to Tuesday, a breakdown of both days, if et cetera, across the week. That's targeted for sure, but it's not easy and quick to answer. Yeah. I have stuff to do, and I'm probably not going to respond to questions like that. So make them targeted, but make them easy, make them quick. Something else that has been really helpful in both of my successful job applications is writing about behavioural science. For me personally, whether that be like a blog or personal essays, things like that, being able to share that you keep on top of the latest research and can communicate it eloquently is really beneficial. Also, it's a good talking point with people. So I found that to be really helpful. And then talking about things that you can do or share to upskill yourself, especially at Cowry. We're always looking for people who have that behavioral design capability, as we said. So if you've got a creative talent when you're doing applications, showcase it, show people that you can do design as well as just talking about behavioral science, or show that you can do research and statistical analysis and all of these things rather than just focusing solely on behavioral science. And your degree and things like that. And then finally, just look out for things like internships and summer schools. And I'm not just saying that because Cowry has a summer school every year. Ogilvy has one too. But we do a lot of our hiring through the summer school because it gives us the opportunity to have a chance to get to know people a bit better over a longer period of time. I mean, Azim can attest for that. It's just it's like one of the best sort of filtering options that we have at Cowry, and I know a lot of other companies do the same. So being on the lookout for those summer schools is really important. Azim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what just adding on to what Sarah said, I suppose, is the first thing that she said, which really resonates with what I think is, I think that behavioral science is a really small community, and although I feel like there is a lot of showmanship at the upper end of the scale in terms of gravitas and blah blah blah, but I'm not going to get into that. Where that is not present is, I think, in sort of the general behavioral science community. I think I've found it over and over again, whether I was 16 and I was looking for someone who just wanted to help me understand what behavioral science is, or whether I was 21 at Warwick and went to the Shard and then just had a long chat with Jez, who was so happy and willing to explain what Cowry does in person and take me through it in detail. Persistence has helped me throughout, and I would encourage you to be persistent as well. Don't give up if people don't reply to you. Don't bother them over and over again. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But feel free to reach out to different people, and you'll find that through persistence, you'll find the right people who can help you understand and hopefully answer a few of your questions. And again, just to what Sarah said, I myself do reply to a lot of LinkedIn messages, but only to those who've really taken the effort to make it something that I can actually help them with. Like, I do get a lot of messages which are, again, very similar to Sarah, just really long, and it's too difficult to put in that much time and effort and invest that much time in replying to one single message, which is too targeted even. So yeah, just second. Cool. Moving on to the final frequently asked question is, how much experimentation do you actually do? So all well and good, you guys say you do friction, you do fluency, that's brilliant, and then you'll test, but how much do you actually test? I really like that question, even though it's our frequently asked questions, but I genuinely like answering the question because I think the answer is both a lot and very little at the same time. And I can explain. A lot because I think compared to the general standard for behavioral science and consulting or behavioral science in general, we by far do the most experimentation I have seen of any company. We dedicate ourselves and try and test every single solution where we possibly can. It's a fundamental part of our structure. And very little because I don't think it is actually quantifiably very little. It is a large majority of our project. But in my sense, I want it to be all of our projects. So in my sense, I want us to figure out a way to test every single time. It's not realistic. It will never be achieved. But I still think there is capability and opportunity to grow, especially with the introduction of standardization of some of these testing methodologies using perhaps machine learning or AI. Or in a more holistic sense, just standardizing the entire process to perhaps better accommodate experimentation. Not sure how someone would do that, given that we are already the leaders de facto in this. But yeah, that's an opportunity and a way forward. So a lot, but very little is my answer to that. And finally, I will give it over to you, and we're going to go to Mentimeter, and I'll pass it to Sarah to answer the first question.
Yeah, I think some people were having trouble with the Mentimeter, so we've also got a few questions in the chat, so we can field those as well. I just wanted to bring your attention to them, Azim. I would like to ask if a master's degree has provided you with a solid foundation to start your work at Cowry. That is I don't know if actually I should have taken this one, to be honest. So Azim, it'll be interesting to get your view as well. Like I said, I studied, I got a master's degree in behavior change from UCL, which was a very specific. So I went there in the first year that they ran the course. So we were kind of the guinea pigs. And there was a lot of focus around behavioral science, behavioral change frameworks and models. So we were working directly with Susan Mickey, who obviously developed the COM-B model. I can talk your ear off about COM-B for days and days, but we didn't learn about biases and heuristics. We just didn't learn about them. So in some ways, I've got a good foundation of knowledge. I know about models and frameworks that maybe other people haven't necessarily heard of, or I know about the more sort of the detail of them better than other people. There was a huge gap in terms of the sort of the more behavioral economics piece. Whether I think that helped me at Cowry, I honestly don't really think it did. I don't think I would be put off trying to work for a company like Cowry without having that master's. On the other hand, putting yourself through a master's course where you're learning about behavioral science and being around people who are interested in behavioral science, almost that opens the doors that you need. So I was part of reading groups and discussion groups with my peers where we were talking about the latest research, the latest findings. We were sort of forming our own little networks. We were running projects. We were, strategizing about how to talk to different employers, potential employers, and things like that. So almost that was the kind of the value that I got out of it. And actually, I have friends at Cowry who were on the same masters as me, so that's kind of what I got rather than the content. I think that's kind of unique though, because after that year they definitely changed the format, they definitely changed the content, so I wouldn't say that is reflective of what your experience would be now, which is why I think maybe you should field the question for the Warwick students.
Yeah, I suppose it would be interesting to know that. Simple answer, yes. If you wanted a one-word answer, yes, absolutely, 100% has provided me a solid foundation to start my work at Cowry. Was the transition difficult? No. But obviously that's not going to be an effective answer, so let me explain. I think the Warwick Masters does a really good job at providing you exactly with what your question asks, a solid foundation. So whether that's neuroeconomics, or whether that's the behavior change module, or whether that's methods and analysis in R, which I'm sure, I don't know if that course has changed at all, but at least in the time I was there, I literally did not sleep for 2 weeks. But anyway, it's all, in my view, and you guys are probably in your term 1, I believe, yes, not come into term 2, but every single module, there's bits and pieces of that has really enabled me to be as foundationally strong as I am coming into this job and really getting a kickstart and a head start, which has meant that I really require, my training wasn't so much on the behavioral science as it was in client relations and all these sort of softer skills. But what that meant is that I could be ready to go and kickstarted much sooner than I think traditionally you would find. And any of you guys coming from this masters, I think I in my opinion, at least, extremely fortunate, because I really do feel the peers that you meet, the friends that you make, the research, whether that you're in groups such as the Warwick Behavioural Insights team, which I was very much a part of, both the nudge unit as well as the engagement unit. Not sure if you guys have both of them still, but anyway, I was part of both. All this cultivates into like a really solid foundation, and helps you make that transition really easy. So great choice, guys. Cool. I will mark this one as answered and we'll go to the next. Should I go for this one, or Sarah, would you like to?
Why don't you take it?
Sure. Yeah. As a fresh graduate, how do you build your credibility around behavioral economics, which can help you to reach a meaningful position? As a fresh graduate, I think you don't have credibility around behavioral economics. That's the honest answer. You don't. There's no way for you to build credibility in that sense. What you can do, however, is show that you're A, passionate, and B, you're very cognizant of the latest research and skills. So precisely what Sarah said earlier, when you send out these resumes, send out your CVs, showcase those skills and talents, because as a fresh, if we are hiring a fresh graduate, we are not expecting them to have credible proof of their behavioral economic skills and 10 years of work experience. They are fresh graduates, but what we are expecting is for them to show their passion and to show their skills in a verifiable and demonstrable sort of way. And the summer school really allows that, because we can really see and feel and sort of speak with those people. And anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was actually just going to add one thing that I remembered actually about some of the applications that I have seen over the years, which is do some wider reading and reference that in your applications. We can tell if people have been on the same course, or at least I could tell that people have been on the same course because we were getting the same research sort of parroted back, or the same. So I remember getting 3 applications that all talked about one specific study about I think it was getting the public to sort of do a modal shift in transport usage from cars to trains, and checking down, they're all in the same master's course, they're all in the same year. That's fine, but I think if you want to stand out, just do your wider reading. It helps, right? You're trying to make yourself stand out from the crowd, and if that crowd is your peers, the wider reading definitely helps.
Yeah, and I think just also being humble about the fact that you are a fresh graduate, it can really help build your credibility as a humble person, even though it doesn't help build your credibility around BE. Being humble and sort of as Sarah said, doing some wider research, it can really help you reach that meaningful position. I deal with most of the CVs and just arranging different sessions. So I'm sort of the first point of contact at Cowry. I don't make any decisions. So if you guys have any ideas about mailing me, I don't make any decisions. I am just the first point of contact. But I see all of this, and what that means is I get a lot of people who say, tell me your opportunities. What opportunities do you have? And I don't know the person. It's so hard to build a connection. So by being a bit humble, standing out, it can really, really make a difference in terms of the coming from the first point of contact, I suppose. Yeah. Cool.
Before you move on, well, we can move on to the next question, but someone posted a question on the Facebook comment chat about ethics, and I think that's a really good, important question to answer if you don't mind, Azim. So the question was, I didn't see an ethical audit in your process flowchart. How do you decide if your interventions are ethical? Are there any rules or guidelines that you follow?
Yeah.
And I think you've basically highlighted something that we should have put onto our process flowchart, because it very much does exist and it does sit within that process. So it's not that we're just like, no, ethics, we're not going to consider those. There's sort of a broader overlay, which is that we don't work with certain industries, certain companies in certain sectors that would be ethically sort of ambiguous for us. So gambling is always a great example of that. The classic tobacco, alcohol, that kind of stuff. We won't engage with business like that. And then on top of that, we have a quite stringent ethical framework that guides not only what projects we take, but how we work through those projects and how we make sure that we're behaving in an ethical manner throughout. The framework's on our website. We don't really have time to go through it now, but you can look at that more in depth. I think in terms of sort of a more micro sort of view on ethics and nudging and that kind of thing, when people say, it's not about the type of project, it's about nudging in general, maybe that's not a conversation that we have to have, but I think it's always important to remember that you can't create a neutral choice environment when you're designing a product or a service. So you're always making decisions about what color to use, where to put things, how to lay things out. It cannot be neutral. And so we're just optimizing that process. We're not sort of creating extra confusion or forcing consumers to make certain choices. And that is, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that sits very centrally to how we work at Cowry and how we want to be proud of our work. We want to be able to share it with you guys and be like, this is amazing. We don't want it to feel sleazy or unethical in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love Cass Sunstein's series of articles on nature nudges. And anyone who hasn't read them, I would definitely ask you to do so. And just on that point of ethics, I suppose it is really important. At least I'm very proud of the fact that I worked on, sort of refining our ethical framework and bringing it down to what it is. And it is absolutely central. It's a governing body over our entire process. And a part of it does include a sort of instruction set, so to speak, on how we conduct post-mortems and pre-mortems of the interventions that we do. So fundamentally, that is a part of our process, but it guides every single step of the way. So very proud of that. And I'm also very proud of the fact that we have it on our website and we're very open and transparent about our process. And the reason I am is because as far as I understand and as far as I know, there is no other behavioral science consultancy in the world that has a published ethical guideline and ethical process. So just very, very proud of that. And I'm very happy that you asked that question. Cool. I'm going to mark this one as red and then let's go to the next one. Sarah, do you want to take this one? I think this one was submitted online and is there a preferred education? I messed that up.
Is there a preferred education obtained to start working? I think honest truths time, there is a supply and demand issue when it comes to behavioral science and jobs, which is that there is quite a lot of supply these days and less of a demand. I'm not saying there isn't a demand, but as behavioral science masters, behavioral economics masters programs become more rampant, the field gets more popular. That means that there are a lot more people studying it and therefore looking for jobs. A master's degree, I would say at this point in time is a reasonably safe bet, in the sense that everyone at Cowry has a master's degree, unless you can make yourself stand out through experience, or Azim amazingly founded his own business, so something incredible like that. I would say at this point in time, getting a master's is probably sort of standard level for entry. What was my question? Whether we I don't know if you had anything to add. I think I added that question.
I think 1 year ago, when I used to sort of do talks like this or host the Under the Hood session, I suppose my answer and also other people at Cowry's answer may have been slightly different. 2 years ago even, where we would encourage people from an undergraduate background to also apply because there was a reasonable chance. But over the last year, not only things have become really competitive, but the industry has started to organize. So there is the GABS initiative, for anyone who may know, which essentially is an independent body that certifies behavioral science consultancies, just essentially because there has been a massive growth of companies that were, market research firms that just changed their title or just added behavioral market research and suddenly call themselves a behavioral consultancy of like 100 people, and nobody in that company knows anything about behavioral science. They're just doing the exact same thing that they did before. Or consultancies that just had consultants, slap behavioral before it. We have behavioral consultants, don't worry, we'll take care of it for you. So there was a huge amount in this last 1 year itself, a huge growth in behavioral consultants and behavioral scientists who have no qualifications whatsoever. And I don't have anything against those companies, nothing personal, but that just meant that there needed to be some sort of standardization that needed to happen. So GAPS is that industry body that standardizes it. And one of the requirements for a company to be standardized as a behavioral scientist, or actually for you individually as well, if you want to go down an individual path, is to have at minimum a master's degree. And I think that's really changed the benchmark in terms of what companies might be looking to accept. There might be there absolutely will be companies who are happy to take undergraduate. Not everybody needs to have a master's in that company, just mind you. But if you want to be certified by CABS, then you need to have a master's. And if the company wants to be certified by CABS, then 75% or someone of your company needs to be have a master's in behavioral science or related discipline. So, well, I hope I answered that one. And we'll go to the next. Okay, that jumped right up to the top as the most upvoted. Hi, I'm planning to do the data and behavioral science masters at Warwick. What is your view of the role of behavioral data science at Cowry and BSci in general, since it's an emerging topic nowadays? I can take this one if you'd like.
Yeah, Sarah? I think it's more in your wheelhouse, please. Feel free.
And unfortunately, we'll have only time for maybe one more question after this, but maybe two if we can wrap this up quickly, but sorry about that, guys. So I think data and behavioral science is an amazing master's to do at Warwick. I think it gives you the skills that are required to be a behavioral scientist, but also a data scientist. We've hired 2 people as interns just this year and who are currently doing our track, who are data scientists, and one of them did do the masters in data and behavioral science, and the other one did do the behavioral and economic science, but with a focus in data specialization. So not something that's offered officially, just someone who really enjoyed the data science aspect of it. In my view personally, I think behavioral data science is going to be growing at Cowry, and BSci in general is absolutely going to explode in the next few years. It already has in many ways. We're using it from a variety of things, such as our behavioral fingerprint project to sentiment analysis to a few other projects that we have in the works in wraps currently. But it's absolutely something that's pivotal and very useful. So if it's something that you're interested in, go for it. Not only is it going to be applicable for data science projects, behavioral science projects and companies such as Cowry and others, but you can also always decide to pick up a role in data science and be a behavioral data science, any organization such as the Behavioral Insights team or a most general data science related company. So hope I answered that, and I'll go to the next one. For you, Sarah.
There is a huge gap between what academics and industry have. So how do you see a fresh graduate bridging that gap after academics? I think what is really nice about the sort of the fresh graduates we get through Cowry specifically is that they bring this perspective and this understanding of the academics to the table that we absolutely try our best to stay on top of, but it's just not the same as being at university and sort of immersing yourself in it 24/7. We strive at Cowry to be reading the new papers as they're published. We've got sort of internal newsletters and a database that we update with any new papers. But when you get students come in or graduates come in and they've just recently been studying under all of these the amazing professors and lecturers at university. They bring to the table this information and this perspective that we can't really capture. And I think that's really key in making sure that we keep our understanding fresh and we keep our insights up to date. I think it's really easy to fall back on sort of the way that you've been doing things in the past and the research that we all now are so familiar with, but that's not how we move the field forward. That's not how we grow as a company. We have to push on, and the way we do that is with fresh blood, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that answer and everything you said. I can't really think of anything I can add. What I'd like to say is we do have 2 minutes left, and perhaps what we can do is do a quick fire through the questions, just a 1-sentence answer, and hopefully if it is a question that can be answered in a sentence, we will. If not, we will unfortunately need to skip it. So this one: does Cowry Consulting hire outside of the summer school? Yes.
I didn't do the summer school.
I didn't do the summer school either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you mostly working separately on different parts of projects, or is it mostly teamwork? What is your favorite part of consulting companies? Mostly teamwork, and favorite part of consulting companies is just interacting with different clients. I think it's just wonderful. What
variety? Yeah, getting that variety of experience. Like, every project is different because every client is different. So even if you were doing the same thing with a different person, you get that variability that's really just exciting and interesting.
Brilliant. Great live, lots of useful knowledge. Thank you. Does Cowry Consulting offer any spring summer internships for students? We don't have any particular spring summer internships, but we do have a summer school, and we encourage every one of you to apply. It's going to be on in the applications go live in March. So look out for it, or contact us for any other information if you'd like.
Yeah, and the best thing is, just to add to that, like, I don't know if we'll still be all working virtually next summer. I mean, maybe fingers crossed not, but this year what that allowed us to do is open up the summer school to a much larger number of people, where normally we were sort of physically constrained by space, by having people in the office. Potentially, if we do virtual summer school 2021, that there's a scope for a lot more people, making it a lot more accessible.
Absolutely. I'm a business consultant and approach business from a pain point. What pain points do you solve? Psychological friction points. So anything that hinders a person to perform their desired behavior are the areas that we solve, but from a psychological angle.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to add?
No, that was a good answer.
Do you build credibility in BSci when you have another academic background? How do you build credibility in BSci when you have another academic background? Coursera certificates, read a lot of books, and when you apply to a lot of behavioral science consultancies, including our own, we usually have a lot of questions and answers. And if you can answer those questions, and you all have a master's in another profile, but you can answer them with the same level of rigor that anyone else can, there is no reason we will not pick you. Absolutely, yeah. It's the way I see it. What do you think of remote work, Sarah? Sorry, I've answered a couple of these.
What do I think of remote work? Not my favorite. I'm sort of an extrovert. You might have been able to tell from this live. I've got a lot of energy, and I like to be around other people. So I'm managing, but definitely remote work. I mean, the thing is about our industry, this is more than one sentence, but the thing is about this industry is that it is possible, quite easily to work remotely, and we've been reasonably unaffected, I would say. But on a personal note, I do not like it.
I'm all right, 50-50, like it, but I'm also a big extrovert, so my energy comes from people. So yeah. Have you ever had to deal with a behavioral intervention being worked out, its intention discovered by the target population that led to behavioral relapse after discovery? I think this was another one that was submitted online. How would you approach this if it happened to your clients? One word answer: no, we haven't, because that is not something that we ever worry about, because nudges are intended to be transparent. So if a client discovers it, or if a customer says, "Oh, are you nudging me?" I go, "Yeah,
yes."
That's what we do. What is nature nudges? Cass Sunstein. I'll refer back to that again. Everything is designed. There's no neutral choice architecture. So yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and that brings us to the wonderful end of this presentation. And I realize that I'm still live, so let it be over here. Could you switch us back to our two screens?
I can. I have the power to do that. There we go.
Amazing. And I will try and find us back. There we go. We are back. So thank you, everyone who's joined today. It has been the most excellent session. And we hope, I suppose, that we spread some words of wisdom, but also some words of clarity that helps sort of bridge the gap of what happens in behavioral science after academia. And Sarah?
Yeah, same, echoing Azim's thanks. Any opportunity I get to just talk about behavioural science, I will take it, as you can tell by the fact that I think we've overrun. So appreciate your attention for this entire time. And it's been really nice getting this opportunity, yeah.
Cool. There might be a 10-second delay, so we're going to close the stream now. And I feel free to reach out to Cowry Consulting, download our behavioral fingerprint report if you'd like this Thursday, and you can reach out to us through our contact us from on our website if you have any further questions or you'd like to learn more. See you.